Karen Carpenter, an irreplaceable music icon, left behind not only timeless hits, but also a deeply troubled private life. When her body was found in bed at just 32 years old, both her family and fans were left in shock. From her meteoric rise with the Carpenters to her ill-fated marriage and the relentless battle with a devastating mental illness, Karen endured pain few ever saw. Yet behind those gentle melodies lay a series of romantic entanglements with several famous men. Who were they? And what truly led to her tragic and untimely end? Watch until the very end to uncover the full, never-before-told truth. Karen Carpenter was born on March 2, 1950 in New Haven, Connecticut, into what seemed like an ordinary family, but one filled with quiet tension and hidden pain. Her father worked in printing, the son of missionaries who had lived in China, carrying with him the discipline and rigidity of an older generation. Her mother, Agnes Carpenter, was a typical housewife, proud, controlling, and particularly biased toward the child she considered the family's true prodigy, Richard Carpenter. From a young age, Karen learned what it meant to live in her brother's shadow, the great hope of the family, as her mother often called him. In their New Haven neighborhood, the two siblings would play outside with local kids, laughter mixing with the sharp smack of baseballs hitting gloves. Ironically, in those games, where strength and speed define one's worth, little Karen was often picked before her brother. Despite being smaller and a girl, she amazed everyone with her quick reflexes and fearless spirit. Yet in real life, Karen was almost always picked last. Agnes made no effort to hide her favoritism. She cared about Richard's every note, every achievement, while Karen was only praised for being obedient or for helping her brother. In fact, the family eventually moved to Los Angeles solely to support Richard's musical career, not Karen's. As a teenager, Karen longed for her mother to recognize her own musical gift, but that day never came. Her path to music arrived from an unexpected place: school. A classmate named Frankie Chavez, the drummer for the school band, sparked her curiosity. Karen was drawn to the wild yet precise rhythm of the drums, a sound that felt both chaotic and orderly. She began borrowing Frankie's drum set to practice, and within just a few tries, she stunned him with her natural sense of rhythm. Ringo Starr, the legendary drummer of the Beatles, became Karen Carpenter's ultimate idol. She dreamed of one day playing the drums like him, even owning the exact same Ludwig drum kit he used. But that set cost $300 at the time, a hefty price for the Carpenter family, equivalent to more than $1,500 today. Karen begged her parents endlessly, using every bit of charm and persuasion she had until something miraculous happened. They said yes. The day Karen wrapped her arms around her first Ludwig drum kit, it felt like she was touching her dream. From that moment on, her afternoons were filled with the echoing beat of drums from the family garage, where a thin girl with neatly tied brown hair would lose herself in rhythm. She soon formed an all-girl band called 2+2, determined to prove that women could be drummers too. Something almost unheard of at the time. But that first dream didn't last. When Karen suggested inviting her brother Richard to join, the other members fiercely objected, accusing her of betraying the all-female spirit of the band. The group disbanded soon after. That early failure, however, didn't stop her. Karen, Richard, and a tuba player went on to form the Dick Carpenter Trio. Yet Karen kept one secret to herself. Although she possessed a mesmerizing 3-octave voice capable of stunning any listener, she stayed hidden behind her drums, letting guest performers take the mic. The trio played in nightclubs and even appeared on the talent show, the All-American College Show. At just 16, Karen's voice caught the attention of producer Joe Osborne, who stopped in his tracks to listen. He invited her to record "Looking for Love," a song written by her talented brother Richard. The single didn't make any waves. It failed to chart anywhere in the US. But fate had a strange twist in store. Years later, when the Carpenters became a global sensation, that old 45 RPM vinyl became a prized collector's item. Only about 500 copies are believed to exist today, each valued at around $2,000. At the time, though, Karen still saw herself as just a drum girl, often laughing at the idea that her voice could ever be special. She and Richard continued their musical pursuit with a new group, Spectrum, which landed a gig at Disneyland, performing smooth jazz for families and children. The 1960s were a strange era. The youth were torn between the hippie counterculture and their nostalgic love for Mickey Mouse. Amidst the crowd, someone shouted, "Play Light My Fire," the hit song by The Doors. Wanting to please the audience, Spectrum obliged. Unaware it would be a disastrous decision, word of the off-brand performance quickly reached Victor Gruber, the head of Disneyland's entertainment division. Furious, he stormed over and was horrified to see Karen and her band playing psychedelic rock in the middle of a family park. Within minutes, a verdict was made. They were banned from the Magic Kingdom for life. Karen walked away from Disneyland heartbroken. Yet, as fate would have it, when one door closed, another, far greater, was about to open. 3 years later, in 1969, the real opportunity finally came. Records signed a contract with the Carpenter siblings, marking a new chapter in their career. Their debut album, Ticket to Ride, was released, named after the famous Beatles song they covered. Karen, a devoted fan of the legendary band, worried whether her idols would approve of their soft and feminine version. To her astonishment, Paul McCartney, the man she admired most, listened to the track and exclaimed, "She has the best female voice in the world." That praise deeply moved Karen, but fame never comes without a price. Karen, standing only 5'4", looked tiny behind the massive drum set she loved to play. On stage, the audience saw the drumsticks flying, but she was almost invisible. Richard, who handled the songwriting and arrangements, lacked the charisma to capture the crowd. They realized that to truly win over the public, Karen had to step forward to become the face and the voice of the Carpenters. It wasn't an easy decision. Karen loved drumming. It was her refuge, a place where she could hide from the public eye. Yet she eventually agreed to hire another drummer, Cubby O'Brien, a former Disney Mouseketeer. From then on, Karen became the soul of the Carpenters, while her beloved drums were slowly pushed to the back of the stage. By 1973, the group's albums carried a distinct signature. Karen's sweet, velvety voice dominated, while the sound of drums, once her essence, became only faintly present. But as we'll later see, being the center of attention came at a heavy cost. During an interview in Japan, while the Carpenters were at the height of their fame, a journalist struggled to pronounce the group's name and accidentally said lead sister instead of the Carpenters. The nickname stuck. Japanese fans loved it so much that they printed it on t-shirts. And Karen, with her shy but charming smile, proudly wore one labeled Lead Sister during many performances. Not long after, the song We've Only Just Begun became a phenomenon. The song celebrated new beginnings, love and hope, emotions that millions of young couples of that era could see reflected in their own lives. Its pure melody, romantic lyrics, and Karen's tender, whisper-like voice made it unforgettable. Richard, as always, provided the perfect arrangement to let her shine. Few people knew that We've Only Just Begun had originally been a simple jingle for a bank commercial, but Richard saw its potential and turned it into an eternal classic. From an obscure tune, they created the song that would define the spirit of the 1970s. While searching for inspiration for a new song, Richard Carpenter happened to be watching TV when he heard a bank commercial jingle that caught his attention. He immediately contacted the songwriters behind it and bought the rights. The ad depicted a young wedding, so when Richard and Karen adapted and recorded the song, they kept that same theme, and soon after, it became a worldwide sensation. The Carpenters' We've Only Just Begun was played at countless weddings, so many that it's almost impossible to imagine. Yet surprisingly, this sweet, almost sentimental love song was also used in several dark and chilling movie scenes. Karen Carpenter's emotional voice echoed hauntingly through the horror film 1408, based on Stephen King's story, and in John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness, where the song's bright, hopeful lyrics played as the main character was taken to a mental asylum. At this point, Karen Carpenter was at the peak of her fame, chart-topping hits, platinum albums, and global stardom. But she still longed for something that seemed forever out of reach: love and approval from her mother. Meanwhile, Richard remained the constant source of pride and affection for their mother, Agnes Carpenter. No matter how hard Karen tried, it seemed her mother never truly cared. and that emotional void would have devastating consequences. In 1976, a seemingly harmless moment became a tragic turning point in Karen Carpenter's life. While reviewing footage of one of her own performances, she became fixated on a photo taken on stage. The lights illuminated her radiant face, but all Karen could see was a chubby body. A surge of self-loathing took hold. Since high school, she had dieted occasionally, thinking she was a bit plump. But that picture reignited her insecurity and deepened her obsession with her body image. Determined to fix what she saw, Karen chose an extreme path. Long before having a personal trainer was common among celebrities, she hired one, hoping to achieve the perfect figure. The trainer advised her to abandon her old habits and follow a strict fitness and nutrition regimen. Karen followed every instruction with total discipline, believing she was doing the right thing. But a few months later, when she looked in the mirror, she was shocked by the reflection. Her body was now lean and muscular, far from the delicate feminine frame she had always wanted. Disappointment and insecurity struck even harder. She immediately quit training and decided to create her own perfect diet. Karen began counting every calorie, weighing every portion, turning eating into a cruel game between logic and fear. During meals with friends, she would act cheerful and offer others bites of her food, a clever tactic to reduce her own intake without raising suspicion. Everyone thought she was simply being generous. Everyone except her mother, Agnes Carpenter. Karen often pretended to eat her full share, but would quietly pass portions to others at the table. When Agnes noticed her daughter's trick, she tried to counter it by insisting Karen taste her mother's cooking afterward, just to make sure she was getting enough nourishment. Despite her efforts to help, nothing seemed to work. The illness had already taken root, and no amount of love or control could stop its devastating course. When she stepped onto the stage in 1975, the audience was stunned, not only by her familiar crystal-clear voice, but by her alarmingly thin figure. The effectiveness of her diet sent shivers down her fans' spines. Letters flooded in from all over, pleading with her to stop. But Karen only gave a faint smile and said she was just a little tired. The pressure on her kept building from directions she never expected. The Carpenters, siblings Karen and Richard, had once been the symbol of wholesome America, gentle, clean-cut, and trustworthy. President Richard Nixon had even praised them as the best of young America. But just as the country was shaken by the Watergate scandal, the perfect image of the Carpenter family began to crack. The sweetness on stage slowly became a mask Karen wore to hide the wounds inside her soul. At 26, Karen Carpenter was financially independent, a global star adored by millions. Yet she still lived with her parents, a situation that suffocated her more than ever. In 1976, she finally moved out, buying 2 luxury apartments in Century City, Los Angeles. Not to show off, but to breathe freely for the first time in her life. She wanted to live like an ordinary woman, to have the right to love, be loved, and build a family of her own. Throughout the early years of her career, Karen avoided relationships. She believed dating was a luxury she couldn't afford, as her packed schedule revolved entirely around studios and stages. But as she neared 30, a deep emptiness began to grow inside her. The applause after every concert was no longer enough to fill the loneliness in her heart. When Karen finally opened herself to love, she dove in like a storm. The first was music producer Mike Curb, who later became a politician, followed by a member of the Osmond family, sitcom star Tony Danza from Who's the Boss, and even comedian Steve Martin. These were bright names, glamorous encounters, yet none of the relationships lasted. Karen was gentle and devoted, but perhaps it was that very fragility that made her so easily wounded. Instead of finding love, Karen sank deeper into her obsession with control. She and Richard continued touring across South America and Europe, bringing along her close friend Ryoni for support. But Ryoni soon realized her true role was not to relax, but to watch over Karen, to stop her from secretly taking laxatives to keep her figure. Her fixation on weight had spiraled beyond control. During that tour, the siblings appeared on the BBC program Nationwide. At first, everything went smoothly until host Sue Loy turned the conversation toward Karen's body. In front of millions of viewers, she listed the numbers showing Karen's drastic weight loss and bluntly asked whether she suffered from anorexia nervosa, a term hardly known at the time. Karen forced a smile, trying to remain poised as always, but panic flickered in her eyes. Richard quickly stepped in, ending the interview by saying, "We're not here to talk about that." The interview ended, but the wound stayed with Karen for years. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was the feeling of being stripped bare before the public. The stage that had once been her home of love and adoration had turned into a place of judgment. In 1980, amid her quiet personal turmoil, Karen met Thomas James Burris, a handsome, successful real estate developer who seemed worlds apart from the noisy showbiz life she had grown tired of. He appeared thoughtful and calm, making Karen believe she had finally found peace. They dated for only 2 months before Burris got down on one knee and proposed. Initially, they agreed to stay engaged for at least a year, but Karen grew impatient, not for fame or wealth, but for the dream of motherhood. She longed for a small, warm home filled with children's laughter instead of the pounding drums of the stage. When they shortened the engagement and announced their wedding just 2 months away, the media speculated that Karen might be pregnant. Yet the truth was far darker. A few days before their rehearsal dinner, Burris revealed he had undergone a vasectomy years before meeting her. In that moment, every dream Karen had of becoming a mother shattered. It became clear that this was why Burris had rushed the marriage, to hide the truth before she found out. Devastated and betrayed, Karen called her mother, Agnes Carpenter, begging for advice and support to call off the wedding. But her mother's response was cold. "You absolutely cannot cancel the wedding," she said. "You've made your bed. Now you must lie in it." It was the worst advice Karen ever received. The wedding went ahead as planned, but the marriage soon turned into a nightmare. Burris cared only about money, demanding cars, houses, and luxuries he couldn't afford. Karen gave him everything emotionally and financially, even handing him tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes up to $50,000, just for spending money. Her bank account dwindled, but worse, her spirit was crushed. Burris was cruel, arrogant, and verbally abusive, leaving Karen trapped in fear and loneliness. All she ever wanted was to be a mother. When she learned that a vasectomy could be reversed through surgery, Karen pleaded with him to try, hoping a child might save their collapsing marriage. But Burris's response was vicious. "I'll never have children with you. You're nothing but a bag of bones." Those words shattered what little self-worth she had left. After the failed marriage and exhausting tours, Karen finally sought help. In 1982, she met psychotherapist Stephen Levinson, who claimed to specialize in treating eating disorders. He thought he had seen severe cases until Karen's confession stunned him. She admitted taking 80 to 90 laxative pills each night. Even more shocking, she was using thyroid medication to speed up her metabolism, despite having no thyroid issues. Levinson immediately confiscated the pills and urged her to stop. But Karen was already trapped in a destructive cycle of dependency. Desperate, he arranged a family therapy session, believing love could heal her. The entire Carpenter family flew from California to New York. In the sterile white room, he asked each person to tell Karen they loved her. Richard, her devoted brother and musical partner, did so easily. But when it was Agnes Carpenter's turn, she coldly corrected the doctor, "Call me Mrs. Carpenter," and said nothing more. She couldn't say the words, "I love you." The room fell into a chilling silence. The session ended without resolution. No one could look Karen in the eye. When her family left, she stayed in New York, clinging to her last hope in Leavenworth. But soon her close friend Rayan discovered a shocking truth. Levincron wasn't a licensed medical doctor. Karen's fragile hope collapsed completely. Her health rapidly declined, and she was eventually hospitalized, fed through a tube. Ironically, this was the brief period when Karen seemed to recover. She began eating again, 3 meals a day, and even smiled more often. Believing she was finally strong enough, she decided to leave the hospital and return to Los Angeles, the place she had always belonged. Though her body had gained weight, her spirit remained as fragile as glass. Many believed she left treatment too soon, but Karen simply smiled and said she wanted to start over. When Karen Carpenter returned to Los Angeles, everyone believed she was on the road to recovery. She was eating regularly, seemed more energetic, smiled, and laughed with friends, and even planned to return to the recording studio, the place where she and her brother Richard had once shone so brightly. Perhaps Karen herself believed she had finally escaped the haunting grip of the illness that had tormented her for so many years. But no one could have known that those faint rays of hope were actually the last light before the darkness of fate. On a February morning in 1983, Karen woke early in the house where she had grown up. She went downstairs, made herself a cup of coffee, shared a brief conversation with her mother, and then returned to her room to get ready for the day. A few hours later, Agnes Carpenter went upstairs and was met with a sight no mother should ever see. Karen lay motionless on the floor of her old bedroom, the same room where the girl who once captivated the world with her voice now lay silent forever. At first, the cause of death was a mystery. Karen no longer appeared dangerously thin. She even seemed to be recovering. But the autopsy revealed a heartbreaking truth. Her heart had been fatally damaged by prolonged abuse of Ipax syrup, a medicine used to induce vomiting. Normally reserved for emergency poisoning cases, Karen had tragically turned it into a tool of self-destruction. Over time, the chemical quietly eroded her heart muscles, ultimately claiming her life at just 32 years old. Karen Carpenter's death sent shockwaves through the music world. Not only was she one half of the Carpenters, the iconic duo that defined the 1970s, but her passing also ignited a worldwide conversation about anorexia nervosa, a disorder long misunderstood and often dismissed. In her honor, her family established the Karen A. Carpenter Memorial Foundation to fund research and raise awareness so that others wouldn't have to suffer in silence as she did. Yet Karen left behind more than tragedy. She left a legacy. Her sweet, warm, and crystal clear voice still brings listeners to tears whenever Close to You or Rainy Days and Mondays plays. Artists like Madonna, Shania Twain, and countless others have cited her as a profound influence. Karen Carpenter's name remains immortalized on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, not just as a star, but as a symbol of fragility, talent, and the heavy price of perfection. Years later, tributes continued to pour in. The 1994 album If I Were a Carpenter, the avant-garde film Superstar, the Karen Carpenter story, told entirely through Barbie dolls and stage productions like Party, where her voice became the soul of the performance. Perhaps that's why, even after all these years, whenever we've only just begun plays, it feels as though Karen Carpenter never truly left. She's simply singing from a faraway place, one free of pain and hunger where her heart can finally rest.